Welcome to Beyond the Firewall, the business bytecast, where tech and business collide. Get expert insights, real-world strategies, and the latest trends in bite-sized episodes. Stay ahead, stay secure, and explore what's beyond the firewall. Welcome back, everybody, to the business bytecast, Beyond the Firewall. Today, I've got a buddy of mine, Vlad from High-Tech Manufacturing. He's the VP of Operations of a family-owned precision machining firm operating for the last 20 plus years in the Mississauga, Oakville area, offering really cool, innovative solutions for aerospace, clean tech, medical, food and beverage industries. So, Vlad, real pleasure. Thank you for coming on to our podcast. We're really excited. So you're the high-tech manufacturing, not the high-tech computer services company or anything along those lines. You do machining versus any sort of tech stuff, eh?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm a Luddite when it comes to IT.
There you go. I was gonna say it's kind of a cool name. I always thought, wait a minute, you're in IT, and the next thing you know, I'm like, no, you're actually in manufacturing, but you're doing that aerospace level stuff or that precision based stuff. So why don't you give us a little bit more about what you do in the sense of precision machining? The average person doesn't understand the difference of just manufacturing or machining. Why don't you kind of give us a bit of an understanding of what that is all about?
For sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show, Aris. I do appreciate that. Yeah. So we, as you say, we cater to clean tech and aerospace. And oftentimes these companies have some very complex designs to their parts. And so it's difficult to achieve tight tolerances. Just for instance, when we talk about tolerances in this industry, we're talking about TOWs. And those are what's referred to as like thousandths of an inch. And so sometimes when we're machining these parts, we have to machine it within 0.001 inch. And so just for a reference, the thickness of a hair is what we would say is 10 tau. So that's 10 times bigger than what we're dealing with oftentimes with the tolerances of what we're machining. And so the technology, as you can imagine, that's required to achieve this is it's pretty high tech, which is why we have our name. And so we have CNC machines. They're multi-axis machining centers. And so oftentimes what we're looking to do is just constantly improve the technology to compete with, the global marketplace, countries like China, et cetera, and just try to make sure that we can get quality parts out to these customers at a low cost.
So we're not doing this old school by hand, and all this.
Well, we still have that. Funny enough, it's we still have some of the what we refer to as the manual machines, and some of the guys holding these hand grinders in their hand, polishing some parts. But that's oftentimes just for small local companies who, it's almost like so to speak, bra shop stuff. And so we're not going to be, there's something that we often think about in our industry, which is don't over process. If someone comes to you and they need something that's quick, just, a quick turnaround, we're not looking to put it on one of our machines that is required for aerospace and, charging them an arm and a leg, so to speak, for what they need. And so, yeah, when it comes to that, then yeah, you'll see guys in the back of the shop holding onto a hand grinder or a drill. But that's very far in between that we would need that.
Really interesting. Yeah. And so, there's this, misconception that, Canada has lost its sort of edge when it comes to manufacturing. And there's been a lot of controversy on that, between federal and provincial. And, now we're talking about trade wars and all this type of stuff. Do you see Canada, still a leader in this space? Do you see, Canadian companies still leading the pack in the sense of, producing high quality goods and innovation?
It's a pretty complex question. From what I see, Ontario specifically was very well known for the auto industry. I mean, we had the Ford plant here in Oakville. And so there was a period of time where that industry was very big. And sometimes I think that, like many industries, as they mature, there's a period of innovation and then people get a little bit complacent. Not to say that's widespread, but you become comfortable with what you do. You invest a lot of money in processes. And so it's difficult sometimes to move the ship, move the operations. It requires a lot of investment and risk. And so I think for some years now, that took hold. And now, with the tariffs and the global marketplace in general, it's really shaking things up. And it's forcing a lot of us to think outside the box and start to look at how we can improve our processes. And we notice sometimes, if for lack of better terms, the older generation, well, they're either looking for someone to take over. You have the younger generation that has a different mindset in terms of technology and what's out there. And so either companies are struggling and deciding to, sell their businesses and retire. And you have other ones who are kind of going full throttle and finding whatever is needed to try and improve the manufacturing base here in Canada and in Ontario. So there are companies around us for sure who are making those changes and are really love what they do, such as myself. And I really love this, and it's something that you're constantly looking to try and improve. And so I do think that there's a place for Ontario. And I think that manufacturing, there's a lot of opportunities. It's a transitionary period, and you have to see those opportunities. And some people are going to be, like everything, are successful, and some will not be. But I think there's a lot of potential.
Right. And one of the things, you're just mentioning here is, so you're running a family business and you're mentioning, people looking to take it over. What kind of impact have you brought to the business since you've stepped into the company? Because I understand, you didn't start out of university or going into university thinking you're going to get into this transition or this journey. Why don't you talk about, like, a little bit of a, career path, but how that's impacted your transition to running or being involved in the family business?
Yeah, it's a bit of a funny story, and so I tell this story a lot of times to people who are at the university stage, just that you never know where life will take you. I went to Queen's. I did my education was in life science. I was always thinking about medicine, and I even did a master's in chemistry. So completely different from what I do now in the industry. And so, after my master's, while I was applying to different pharmaceutical companies, my father asked me to kind of come in and help him out with the company in the meantime. And, I often say as a joke, 2012, I've been stuck ever since and I can't leave. But no, I love what I do. And so, once you commit yourself to something, it's incredible what is achievable. And so, when I joined in 2012, I really had no idea about manufacturing, machining, honestly, nothing about business either, because that's not something I studied. And so it's, you kind of learn along the way, and it just depends on your commitment level. So when I joined high tech, at that time, we were, I would say, a pretty close mix of 50-50 between manual machines and CNC machines. And we've leaned very heavily into CNC since then. So for instance, we had 3 manual lathes and 2 manual mills. And then we had like maybe 2-3 CNC machines. Now we have 2 manual lathes and 1 manual mill. And we have, I think now 9 CNC machines. So
Wow.
And so what it's allowed us to do is the amount of parts that leave the same floor space from then to now has increased at a significant level. And that's all because we're able to consolidate a whole bunch of operations that used to take a few different machines onto one machine. And with being able to achieve the complex geometry, quality, tolerances, everything that's required for a lot of these really high-tech industries. And so that shift is what's allowed us to be competitive in the industry that we're in and continue to grow.
Right. And so would you say that you were part of the catalyst in that decision making process, bringing the family business from 2012 to now, to make all those transitions? Were you one of the key decision makers to say, oh, guys, like, we got to compete with this, technology stuff. We got to make these upgrades? Or was it like a lot of pushback, or was it sort of just a pivotal point in the company where you guys all decided that this is part of the transition path for you?
It took time. So, and when I first started, of course, the existing employees and my father, who's been very good at allowing me to take risks. But of course, at the beginning, there's a little bit of resistance because it's unfamiliar. And so it was a combination of myself and some of the key employees that I have now currently, that we saw some of the opportunities and some of the things that we wanted to implement. And so I would say that it took about 2 to 3 years. So I'd say the big changes between 2015, 2017 where there's pushback, but we knew what we were looking to do and the changes we were looking to make. And then I think once you start to prove yourself, we brought in one new CNC machine and we introduced a new process. And I think once my father and some of the older employees, and when I say older, I mean more experienced, noticed what benefits they were offering, I think every subsequent decision became easier and it was easier to make the point. So it was once we built that momentum, that was huge. And that's something I oftentimes reflect on, is that it's difficult to get the momentum, and then once you have it, it's important to keep it going. And so we really have not released the gas pedal. We're just constantly pushing forward because our team has become familiar and they expect us to constantly be bringing in new machines and new technology, and really it creates excitement within the team because they're always realizing that there's something new that they can learn as well and increase their skill sets. And I think that's a very important thing to keep people kind of present in what they're doing.
Right. So interesting because, like I always say to my customers, is knowledge is power, right? And at the end of the day, we're trying to train customers on how to use AI and how to use, different solutions that we're always advising our customers to acquire. But there's always that pushback element. So would you say that, once not only was it the efficiencies there, once the knowledge was there was the buy-in? Would you say part of that was training and was there a whole learning curve for your team as part of that transition from manual to CNC type technology?
Actually, we kind of went in a slightly different manner where a lot of the manual machines, the operators who were there with us from then are still operating those machines. We found that we've had to bring in. I mean, listen, when I first started here, we had 5 employees. We're at 22 employees now, and so part of it has also been a large growth in the number of employees we have to accomplish what we need. And during that, we were hiring individuals who had some background with CNC machinery, and so that obviously helped. There's already a level of acquaintance with that technology, but of course it takes time to train them and get them up to speed with, when you're in university and college, they only have certain resources available to them and they're not going to be investing like we are in up-to-date technology. And
For
so
sure.
as much as they have some understanding, it takes a lot of time to bring them up to speed. So in that respect, it was hiring new employees, training them. The training is a huge thing. But the initial stages, I think the buy-in was just seeing how efficiently, for instance, when I joined in 2012, there was a certain part that we were making that, we would make, let's say 5 pieces and it would take, I would say, an entire week. Once we changed the way we did it and started putting on a CNC machine, we were able to make, I think, 30 pieces in one week, which is a huge jump. So and it's really rudimentary pieces. There's nothing really complex about it. But just, I think some of the guys seeing the amount of throughput we're able to do with some of these changes was then they started recognizing what's possible. And so that allowed us to buy more machines. But then the more machines we had really 1 or 2 individuals who were capable of running the CNC machines. And now you kind of run out of resources. Well, they can't run like 5, 6 machines. It's impossible. And so then you start hiring. And that's kind of how things continued growing in that way. And those original key members who were the ones who originally were running these CNC machines and they had so much experience are now the ones who are making the programs and the ones
Wow.
training the new guys. And so I think a lot of the employees also see that there's opportunity to grow within our organization, which I think is very important.
That's an incredible snowball effect here where you made this investment. Now you're adding more resources. Your staff have, 5x on that. And then there's so much more potential within the company. That's an incredible success story here. And I'm glad to see that, people in Ontario and in Canada are still able to compete and, scale up their businesses in this competitive market space that, for a while people were saying doesn't exist in North America anymore. And the success is there. So, kudos to you guys and all the success there. So, I'm an IT guy and I'm always in tech and I always like to kind of ask like what's the next page for you guys when it comes to technology? Is the next evolution AI? Is the next evolution? Or what do you see as today your opportunities when it comes to technology and the next investment? Like, do you see AI as a big play, or is that something that you're playing around with today? What do you think?
I think in our industry at the moment, sometimes there's hype. AI has there's a lot of really interesting capabilities for sure. And there's some industries where I think um, it's really showing how those industries can level up. In manufacturing, I think it's a little bit, it hasn't gotten there yet. There are a lot of discussions, for instance, I think the biggest area that we see a benefit with artificial intelligence is going to be with resource planning. So current ERP softwares that a lot of manufacturing companies have, they all have their shortcomings. So we currently use something called Job Boss. It's a wonderful software. It's helped us in an incredible way. So, from quoting parts to sourcing supplies, all the way to invoicing, it's streamlined a lot of the things in the past that our office had to do. And it gives you a much better view of what's going on your floor. But the biggest issue that I think we have is scheduling. And so there's a level of staticness to scheduling with a lot of these softwares. And so you need to prepare a plan of how you're going to do things. But in manufacturing, things change all the time. There might be a breakdown. There may be a customer comes and they need something rushed. And so there's a lack of adaptability to these softwares. And so I do think that where I see a big benefit and what we're very interested to see is how some of these platforms will use AI to allow us to change scheduling on the fly and to be adaptive to make sure that we're still using our machines to optimize the efficiencies and the processes and to make sure that we're still hitting deadlines. So a big thing, for instance, is, we'll have a schedule for the month, and a customer will come through and say, okay, you know what, I know something was due in 4 weeks, but actually we need it next week. Can you guys do it? And, you want to make your customer happy. So we try and figure out how to put that into the process. But that means all these other steps now are going to be pushed, down the pipeline. And it's not always super efficient in knowing how far delayed other parts will be. And so we're hoping that with some of the promises we're seeing, that AI will allow us to be able to see things real time and to give us a far more accurate, predictable timeline so that we can make sure we keep our customers in the loop as things are changing on the floor.
That's cool. Yeah, I think that I've recently spoken to some other customers and people on our podcast in respect to that in construction and other labor intensive things where, it's also they're hoping that AI also helps with acquiring the materials, knowing how much capacity those machines have, and then being able to do resource management, and then knowing that they can improve that entire production efficiency across the board. And then from there, I know some platforms have inventory management systems, but it's not adaptive. And at the same time, like you said, production goes up. Do we have the capacity with the equipment we have today or with the resources that we have today? And what changes do we need to make? And do we have enough product to even produce the request over the next 30 days? Sometimes is not accurate based on manual processes. So it's an interesting balance. And I see the potential that AI can then start analyzing that information, and then you simply go to it instead of a production manager saying, can we produce 10x of these products over the next 30 days? And it'll just simply go through all the ERP system and say, no, you do not, or yes, you can if you bought these following items or added this much more resources. Like, I can see the calculations being done in more of a real-time perspective versus taking 1 to 2 days to figure out if you still can or cannot do something. So yeah, it completely makes sense in what you're saying.
Well,
In
and
that, in
I'll
that
add,
potential.
yeah, sorry, and I'll add another area that's very, very intriguing is that a lot of companies, so this is something that we've noticed with manufacturing companies, and it's a level of evolution. Preventative maintenance is huge. You don't want a machine to go down. When it goes down, that's a huge production loss, and then as we just said, the whole scheduling thing gets thrown completely out of whack at that point. And so a lot of companies do preventive maintenance scheduling. Let's say for us, a lot of our machines now are scheduled like we're once a year we have someone come in, a tech, and we just investigate everything, make sure things are running properly, what things we may predict is going to need to be looked at. And so there are some things that we're looking at, kind of like the Internet of Things. You put sensors on your machines, it's tracking spindle speeds, it's tracking vibrations, it's tracking a lot of different aspects of the machine that may be able to, if plugged in with AI, may allow us to have some kind of predictive ideas as to what we should start looking at or what may have issues. And so that we can either purchase parts and have them on inventory. So when it does go down, we're ready to go with a repair. And so, for instance, we had to buy a ball screw, and it took a month for us to get because I had to come from Taiwan. And we were lucky enough that we caught it pretty early. But if that was not the case, I mean, imagine one of our machines being down for a month.
It's huge.
It's just inconceivable. And so this turned out to be a great situation where we could continue running it, and it wasn't overly damaged. And so, but it was a good wake up call that we need to really keep an eye on that stuff and start investigating how AI can help us in that respect as well. And so I think that'll be another a big advancement if it's achievable.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it never ends. And IoT's been out for years, but I think that, IoT, the Internet of Things, for those that are not familiar with the acronym, you know, Microsoft and Cisco and a lot of companies out there have been producing technology like that. We've been installing it for many companies out there, especially the camera systems that can see the amount of traffic. It can predict shoplifters. It can even alert for, we've even seen security camera systems now that can detect weapons. So if somebody's pulling a weapon out of a concealed weapon out, it'll actually set off a trigger alarm. So there's a lot of really cool IoT things, in agriculture and stuff like that. And I think AI is going to evolve the IoT even another, call it IoT 2.0 or 3.0, because I don't think it was very well received up to now as a mass solution. I would say it was a very niche play from the most part. I didn't have a lot of customers ask for that type of stuff, but I think AI is going to help catapult that industry altogether. Yeah, it's an interesting perspective. So
well, for us,
go ahead.
with IoT, like you said, it's not a new technology, and it's something that has been brought to our attention many times by different representatives. The problem is, and that I realize, is we have a pretty small team. It's wonderful to have all of that data, but how are you going to process all of it? It's just so much information, and how to parse through that in an efficient way that makes sense and that actually will give us some benefit. It wasn't there. I think AI will be a big thing where that we can have an agent or something in the background that's processing all this information and then giving us actionable information, as opposed to just seeing random information and we can't maybe draw the correlations, or it can't make sense to us. And so I think that'll be huge, to be able to continue to have a small team and have information processed for us to make good decisions without having to bloat the amount of people that are trying to process that stuff will be huge.
Yeah. And I've seen a lot of companies invest millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars for all this data. And then it's another round of projects in respect to trying to figure out what to do with the data. And you got to keep it simple. So yeah, again, back to AI simplifying this, I think will be a game changer, making it where and I see AI already doing this in a lot of big data solutions where data is in ERP systems. Big data is in all these different tools, and AI now helps automate a lot of the reporting, the information, even in Excel today. Like if you look at Microsoft Excel or Sheets from Google, the AI agent within that framework now can help analyze data without having to use third-party reporting engines. So, and then the next phase of that is actually using agents, where companies now are building agents. I don't know if you heard of this thing now. So if you're using, Copilot or Gemini, you can create these agents that do repetitive tasks. So you literally open up an Excel spreadsheet and run the agent, and it'll basically process all the data on a repetitive process every month without having to even create the script. It's basically a predefined AI script. So it's pretty cool in respect.
Is that what they're referring to, like agentic AI?
Yes.
Is that kind of the very cool. Okay.
Yes. Agentic AI. Yes.
That's a cool catchphrase.
Yes, is very, and that's where our industry is going, is creating these agents where it allows you for automation of repetitive processes or analysis of data, and it just allows you to simplify things. So intake forms, like doctors and clinics that do all these intake forms, instead of a receptionist having to request that data and then putting it into their medical practice software, the agentic AI will do the entire process and enter it into a third party, app that is maybe not supported, but it has the knowledge on how to enter that data automatically for you. So same thing, like you get a work order. Let's say you've got a regular client that sends you every month different work orders. Instead of somebody sitting there and entering in all that data so that your production for this month, you can create an agentic AI that will read the PO and actually enter it into your ERP system, your production management system, and then it knows where it goes so that you then don't have to have somebody enter that data, especially if it's consistent. So
Mhm.
again, maximizing the efficiency of not having to hire an admin person and then potential errors in entering that data. These are things that, it's just reading purchase orders all day and entering it into your ERP system. So, yeah, it's,
I've also wondered whether it's something that came to my mind because we're in the middle of hiring again. There's two roles we're looking for, and often, we use Indeed.
mhm.
And the number of times you have certain criteria that you're looking for, and there's a lot of applications obviously that come through that aren't quite meeting those. And so sometimes I've thought it'd be interesting to see if you can have an agentic AI that's even filtering through those instead of me looking through, 200-300 resumes. Oftentimes the qualifications haven't matched what I've actually specified for. It does consume a lot of time, and it'd be interesting to see whether, you can have an AI that's able to link to that and parse through it, filter it so that you're looking at actual meaningful applicants that may have a potential to meet what the company is looking for.
Yeah, and I think between companies like Indeed and all that are trying to get there. I think that, I've used them as well, and I think LinkedIn as well, where they are starting to implement some level of AI technology into their platforms. And obviously, it's still hard to decipher, but I think at the end of the day, large corporations, I can only imagine today, have their own AI platform. But when we look at for the masses to be able to create an agent to sort and identify based on your personal criteria versus the resumes that creep through platforms, I see that becoming a main, like one of many things that we will create. I could only imagine the dating app will fly off the shelf first, where, people put in their criteria on, I want, tall and, fit guys and, whatever not. And all these people apply. And then there's like other criterias that they're usually not advertising. And, I can only imagine now AI is going to go online and search, different people and say, yeah, well, he likes animals because I've seen about 30 photos of him on Instagram with animals, which you didn't put in your search. So, maybe that's something you want to consider. He likes pets, and it wasn't part of your initial, top 10 things. So yeah, it's interesting, where you can look at, call it its capabilities to possibly identify. Because what was it, about a year ago, somebody showed me how to create my personal AI replica kind of thing, where no AI knows as much of me as possible, so that if I ask it a question of what I would do, it will typically give me sort of a reference of what I would do based on its knowledge of me.
Hmm.
And so, if it knows all my nuances, it gives me a better understanding on my perspective without having to ask my friends, what do you think I should do? Well, AI is going to give me that. I can only imagine the younger generation not even wanting to do things without verifying that they should be doing it without AI's approval. So at least there will be a bunch of people that will live this way in the next 5 years.
It is uncanny, I'm sure many of us have used ChatGPT and tried to understand its how we can implement it in our daily life. But it's kind of scary sometimes when you ask it, like what are maybe some of my potential blind spots or weaknesses, or
Uh-huh.
how would you describe me based on what you know? And the more you use it, it gets eerily accurate. I tested it out a couple of weeks ago, and the answers when I shared it with my family, they kind of like sit there nodding, like, yeah, no, that's pretty accurate, and it's scary.
It's very scary. Yes. And it still has its, what do they call it? Ghosts and various inaccuracies and whatnot. But yeah, listen, I know people that use it for fitness training where they've uploaded a photo of themselves, give them all their information and stuff like that. You don't even need to do measurements. It actually has an ability within its AI agent to do your dimensions automatically. Somehow it tells you, it even will tell you your body mass index and all that stuff based on your photo. It actually has
You're
a,
telling me you're telling me I won't be able to lie to people about my weight anymore. Shit.
yeah, you can literally do that apparently. I haven't tried it yet, but apparently you can. And
Mm.
and it gives you like this, okay, your body fat is X, and without measurements it somehow gives you, and it's apparently pretty accurate already. And then
Hmm.
it tells you to lose this much weight or to put this much muscle mass. These are the types of things you should do. And it'll give you a meal plan. It will give you a workout routine. You can tell it you got 30 minutes to do a workout. It'll make a 30-minute workout. You tell it you got an hour. It'll do an hour workout. You're going on vacation. You tell it you need to modify it to like a hotel gym. And it's incredible having this personal assistant. And I tell people that if you're not embracing this in some capacity today, you're missing out from an efficiency, not in the sense of replacing you or changing your life, but helping you get through some of these challenges. Because at the end of the day, there are other people out there doing it. And it could be from a financial benefit, it could be from an efficiency benefit, it could be there is a tangible benefit. You just have to figure out what that benefit is and you make it that. So you can't afford a personal trainer and pay 75 bucks to 100 bucks an hour to sit there over you at the gym and make you work out. Well, AI can at least give you a fitness program to follow. And if you're honest with it, it will try to motivate you and you can actually instruct it to be either aggressively motivating me or passively motivating me. So it'll tell you what a bum you are and how you're not going to the gym, or it'll say, "Oh no, it's okay. Try better tomorrow." It'll be a little bit more gentle with its encouragement. So I think a lot of people are not getting all that out there yet, and I think playing around with it is not. It's like saying I'm not going to use Google 20 years ago.
Hmm.
People were like, I got the library and my encyclopedia. Why do I need to use Google to search things up? And now nobody's got an encyclopedia set. I remember growing up, and that was like my prized possession to have an encyclopedia set in
Yeah,
my
likewise.
in my home, and I didn't have to go to the library to reference the information. Now it's in Google and other search platforms, but AI is just the next level of Google search, and the fact that Gemini now incorporates Google's 10, 20 years of search history, and now using its AI capabilities, which is massive. Gemini is going to be a powerhouse to deal with, and that's just the top three, right, between Microsoft, Google, and Chat GPT. So OpenAI, but so
Well, and
the
another thing I remember. So at a conference I was at recently, we listened to Harley Finkelstein from Shopify, and he kept bringing up Perplexity. I'll be honest, I hadn't heard about it till that point, and so I looked it up, and I've actually found that I've started to. I mean, ChatGPT covers a lot of really cool things, but Perplexity is interesting as well. And that what you just said earlier is trying to make our time more efficient. Maybe I'm looking for, I don't know, running shoes, and you go on Google and you start looking up reviews, but Perplexity or in ChatGPT, it's nice to be able to just consolidate all of that research into one spot instead of me jumping around between reviews and different sites, and you have everything kind of consolidated onto one page. And so I find the amount of time that it takes me to research something personal that I'm looking for, it takes much less time, and I have more free time for focusing on business and how we can improve the technology we're doing, our processes. And so it's all of those like little things I think that add up. And so, like you said earlier, I think as much as some people are afraid of AI, and we're always looking at how it can go in a bad direction. I think a lot of times people think like ex machina, or all these crazy end results. We are dealing with an environment where, especially in the business world, that if you aren't doing it, someone else will, and they're going to get the edge. And so we need to constantly be adapting, and it's extremely important.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I fully agree with you on that. Somebody else will do it, and even for a little while, there may be an advantage that you don't want to be missing out on. It's
Mhm.
not a FOMO thing; it's just a reality that you know, if somebody's got an ability to have an edge over a competitor, why not? And it could be making you more profitable, more efficient, more productive. Whatever that edge is, it's not cheating. It's a resource. It's a tool.
Mhm.
And if you're not making best use of it, it's like saying I'm going to walk to work every day when there's a bus, or you've got a car or a bicycle. Why would you walk to work? It takes you that much longer to get there, so you got to wake up that much earlier to get to work, and that's what's that's progress. That's just the way the world has always worked. And those that didn't agree with it, they were still pushing horse and buggies when farmers were starting to put mechanical equipment on the farmer's field. The next thing you know, they were twice as productive.
Mhm.
So, speaking about the positive sides, what do you see as some of the challenges, that we're facing these days? Or would you say is, currently in the manufacturing space in general? Doesn't have to be your business, but in general, what do you see some of the current challenges that your industry is facing these days?
You mean just in general, not strictly speaking
Not
about like AI?
not high tech, yeah, just general challenges right now in manufacturing. What would you say today is a current challenge?
A lot. I feel like,
Yeah. Besides the
yeah,
trade war, which is back on the table after they try to sneak in a tax on digital technology.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, so last Friday, that definitely freaked me out. I shouldn't say freaked me out. It's just like, oh, here we go.
Yeah,
It feels like every day you think you have a new plan and strategy about how to approach things, and every day is something new that you got to deal with.
yeah,
Manufacturing has always been a very difficult industry. Like we were speaking about earlier, it's very competitive. Oftentimes, I think the competitive nature of it comes to just complacency with some of the industry and in trying to rely on old technology to continue accomplishing the jobs that are needed, and so you don't become efficient at what you do. And so, I would say right now the difficulties, obviously, the trade war is a big one. There, I think, is some fear. In many industries about the consumer debt load and where the US dollar is going and how intense these trade tariffs are going to be. And so some of the industries we've noticed have slowed down, and not necessarily because they're in industries that the demand for the product isn't there. I think it's just a widespread kind of hesitation that everyone has. And so that's something we've noticed. And so you just you try to weather it out and try to adapt. And so we're using this period right now, like the manufacturing industry is there's definitely a slowdown. And so we're using it right now to investigate our processes, investigate new technologies. Sometimes we had ideas we just didn't have the time to do. And so during these periods, I think is the best to just take a step back, take a breather, and start tackling some of the things that we just didn't have the time for. And inevitably, there's always cycles. You look at the economy, and it's every time there's a down period, it comes back up. And when it comes back up, we want to make sure that we're prepared to take as much work as we can, and that we have a better proposition to our customers for cost efficiencies, for quality, for consistency, for delivery. So yes, things are difficult right now, but I have faith that it'll come back. And there seems to be just a realignment going on in a lot of the global affairs, which I think happens every so often, and it's important to keep that in mind. There's a book I think that's great that I've read now twice. I always kind of go back to it, called The Psychology of Money. And one of the things that always stuck out to me is, just with stocks, when you look at day to day, you see these huge, crazy spikes. And, people, if you're new to it, you get emotionally freak out. And then you just make these, reactions to decision. Your decision making is very reactive. But then when you start scoping out, you pull it out and you look at like the last 10 years, the last 20 years, you see this trend going upwards. I think it's the same for manufacturing. There's shocks going on right now, and it's not new. It's happened many times, and it's just a matter of looking at the big picture and just preparing yourself. Being smart about, again, controlling what we can control, efficiencies, investments, training your people, and making sure that you present yourself to new industries and customers so that you prepare when things inevitably come back, that you have the right foot forward.
Do you see the next generation of people doing this work? Because, you mentioned it before around, hiring people, but I hear a lot of rumbling in various industries where manufacturing, there's not as much interest from the younger generation in the sense of pursuing this as a career. You yourself didn't think you were going to go into this industry. Do you think this is another industry sort of like, trades these days where you're hearing in the news, you can make better money as a plumber, as an electrician than you can as a social media marketing manager kind of thing? Do you see manufacturing another sector that there's great potential in AI and a lot of these automation processes are not going to be as impactful, and there's going to be a shortage of those people?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would say that there's been big changes in the way the perception of this industry. I think that as technology improves, it doesn't come off as like a dirty job. You're dealing more with like automated systems. We have a robot now, and we're looking at maybe how we can increase the number of robots we have in automation. There's vision systems for quality control that we're investigating as well. So there's going to be aspects of our industry that becomes more tech based, and the people that are required to be able to run the machines will have to have a better understanding, oftentimes, of programming or technology. And so I think that some of that will revitalize the industry a little bit and change people's perception so that they can, for lack of better terms, be proud when they say that they're a part of an industry like this, as opposed to it being looked down upon. And I also think that AI is also automating a different area or different industries. I think the trades is not something that it can affect as much as some other ones. Let's say, like, I don't know, not that I'm saying you should go to ChatGPT for legal advice, but you can source a lot of information that gives you some ideas, for accounting, for law, for whatever. And then obviously it's always good to go to a professional. But I think when you're talking about machining, you can't, it doesn't have the same effect. It's going to help us with decision making, but you still need the people that are going to run the machines. And as more and more people retire from this industry, there's going to be smaller players. I think it'll also become a demanding area for careers, and so that I think will drive up kind of wages, etc. As the demand goes up, wages go up, and that's an inevitable part of every industry. And so we're hoping that there will be a revival. But yeah, I mean, who knows? It's hard to. I don't have a glass ball, but there are changes right now that we've noticed. Yeah,
Sure. Yeah. And when I look at manufacturing, you look at German companies, for example, you look at BMW and even Tesla, like you do not see guys manufacturing cars that like they were 30 years ago, where like there's like 50 people on the assembly line, putting in screws, and it's 90% robotics. It's machinery that does 90% of it. And I think I saw some demos where like at a BMW dealership where like there's a guy in a lab coat and he's like the floor technician. I was in there going, he's in a white lab coat in an assembly plant. I'm like, this is insane. And
it's incredible.
It's all done with robotics, right? At the end of the day, it's machinery and AI, and they've got high tolerances and stuff like that. So I'm only going to assume that at some point in time, this type of technology is going to trickle down into smaller manufacturing facilities. And you're right. Like, I think the perception today, just like any sort of manual labor, is that it's dirty work. You come home covered in tar or covered in, some sort of, grime. And, nobody thinks that that's an attractive job these days. But at the end of the day, yeah, you're right. Social media marketing people, you look at CGI today, they're almost saying that actors may be obsolete at some point in time, or fill-ins. You may not even need extras, because at the end of the day, hiring all these extras, and AI can now generate all these extras, and you don't need them anymore. You wouldn't even know the difference between, let's call it, the real actor and the extras that are filling out in the background. So it's there are industries that are going to be impacted, but I still think manufacturing, my opinion is, I think manufacturing is still going to be, for another 5-10 years, completely untouchable when it comes to physical knowledge, people, resources. And AI and machinery and robotics is going to augment that. It's going to be making it so that you'll be able to produce double and triple eventually, like you said, robotics with loaders, and being able to do certain things within the production is going to be there. But depending on the size of your company, it may not be 100% there or not.
Well, we've explored. We have one machine now that runs 24/7.
Wow.
So that's our first foray. Listen, I mean, if 24/7, there's 2 hours of downtime because you have to clean kind of the chips and you have to reload some of the tools that have been worn out. So let's say 22/7. But that's our first foray into something like that and the throughput. And like you said, like we didn't displace a worker. It was a new technology we implemented, and now we have individuals who are becoming capable of understanding the robot and how to tweak it, how to work with it. And so we see huge benefits there, but both throughput, the cost has gone down for our customers for that product. And now you have one operator that can technically be, managing a few different machines. And so it just the efficiencies go up a lot. And and like you said, it's a much cleaner job. The robot's the one getting dirty with the coolant and the oil, not the operator.
Yeah, 100%. And it's a balance, right? At the end of the day, talking about replacing jobs, when we want to compete with countries like China or India or any other country out there, or even Mexico, labor rates are cheaper in these countries, but innovation is going to outweigh anything to do with cheap labor. And so you have to balance it in the sense of, do you invest in infrastructure, or do you think that cheap labor is just always going to win? And the reality is quality, we've learned as well in the last 10 years, time of delivery, service, relationships. And so shipping product, even if we're looking at being green and carbon, we know that products being manufactured in some of these countries, they're not using the best green footprint. They're not using the most energy efficient processes. They may be using chemicals and toxic forms. There's no green initiatives in these countries. So, or if there are, it's very little. So having that local manufacturer, you've got all the quality control systems, you've got also all the environmental, you've got quality resources. And then from there, you're investing in innovation. I think that that's the right mix for Canadian and North American manufacturing to be that global presence, because in 10 years from now, if you're not doing it now, you're going to miss a massive window to capture some aggressive business. So, good for you guys, because I hear a lot of pipe dreams with a lot of companies wishing to go 24/7. 2 hours of loading time, or should I say maintenance time a day, to me is still a 24/7 machine in respect to production. Means the machine is on. It just doesn't mean that it's actually turning. It's just in its loading stage or in its maintenance stage for that stage as part of the loading process. A continuous process is next to impossible without some sort of loading or cleaning period. I haven't seen one yet. So, even in food manufacturing, there is a stage where they produce the food, goes through the assembly line, and then you still can't just put another batch of product in there. It needs to be some sort of cleaning and maintenance done on the assembly line. Otherwise, you eventually can have contaminants. And so every manufacturing process needs to have its, call it, cleaning, servicing time. And I'm not an expert in that space, but I have worked with enough customers out there to see that sort of stage. Even when you get close to 24/7, it's still impressive. So yeah, I kind of approaching an hour now, but I wanted to kind of, get some insights on you. So what's next for Vlad and high tech? What do you guys see in the next 12 months? What's on the horizon for you? What are you guys looking for? What are you guys doing? What's new and exciting? What's happening?
So right now we're ISO certified. We got ISO certified last year, which was a big hallmark. I mean, a lot of the processes we did were already, would have satisfied the criteria, but we went for the certification last year and got it. We're working now on the AS so that we can go after different types of work within the aerospace industry. And so right now we're just investigating what industries are maybe worthwhile for us to enter. I don't think people realize sometimes in Ontario how many different manufacturing industries there are. You have mining, you have nuclear, you have medical, you have aerospace. There's all sorts of things out there, and niche businesses with incredible products. I think right now, at least my role has gone more into trying to get a better footprint into some of these interesting industries. We've been joining various memberships as well to increase our presence and to increase our networks. Relationships are extremely important. A lot of the success we've had is both because of our team, the relationships we have with the vendors and suppliers. And so we're always looking to improve those as well. And also to see exploring other countries, US is a big one now, obviously with all the trade wars and everything going on, to see what opportunities there are down there. But I think at the moment, the AS and the aerospace and defense are going to be our big targets moving forward. Obviously, it's unfortunate that in some ways things are becoming tense around the world. And those are industries also that we feel maybe in demand. I mean, we just heard Carney's increase the contributions that Canada is pledging to do for NATO, and so those are industries that I think will have more and more demand in Canada as well.
Yeah, definitely. I was actually going to ask you, does it make sense to start, venturing into new verticals versus new markets? And I know with us, it's always a balancing act because certain industries, certain services that we offer become either obsolete over time because, like back in the day, I was selling mail servers, and today that's just Office 365 or Google Workspace, and nobody has a mail server in their office anymore. So you kind of have to move with the times. And then, last couple of years, we've also debated on, do we look for new verticals or new solutions? And we've actually done both, where we've started our AI offering, and at the same time, we've just opened up 2 years ago. We opened up also operations in the U.S. So yeah, it's an interesting kind of juggling act when you run a business and you want to grow your business, and you have to figure out, okay, what's my next opportunity? Markets, or in the sense of new market, US, Europe, or something maybe out of province, right? Like we were exclusively in Ontario for the first 10 years, and then we grew nationwide across Canada, because there's a whole manufacturing sector out in Alberta for you guys, like you said,
It is pretty
oil and
big.
mining. It's massive, right? And if the rulings change, even if without the rulings change, but Canada's got the world's largest resources, untapped resources. The engineering and the manufacturing of all that is incredible potential. So yeah, there's a lot of verticals, a lot of niches, and at the end of the day, globalization is still alive. It's just where those opportunities lie.
Yeah,
So
no, 100%. Yeah, yeah, and hopefully Canada continues to and also for governments. Hopefully, there's incentives for manufacturing companies to kind of take risks. Really, it's all about risks. A lot of times we have ideas and you fail and you learn from them and you usually grow from them as well. And so it's just important for the environments to be comfortable for us to be able to do those types of things. And so yeah,
do,
but Alberta is a big one for sure. Yeah.
Do you use services like EDC, BDC? Like EDC is supposed to be big for you guys. Is that still a thing where government is investing through manufacturing and through other verticals like that, or is it not as popular or not as relevant to these days? Or what's your take on that?
At the moment, it's not something that we've tapped into. It hasn't quite fit the criteria that we have or that our needs. And
Right.
we have actually spoken with a company out of Quebec, who caters towards manufacturing businesses to try and look for bursaries and government funding and all that. And so actually, I have a meeting with them later today. But BDC, we haven't really, no, not entirely. We've connected a few times, but just I don't think it quite matched our needs.
Right. I always like to say that the Canadian government's really good at stealth marketing, right? And
Mhm.
they put all these, programs out there between provincial and federal. You really need to dig hard to find the right program to fit your business to be
Mhm.
able to take advantage of it, and it's not very straightforward.
And I don't find, at least from my experience, and I'm not going to say that that's the absolute, final say. That I'm sure there's things I've missed, but I don't find that they typically cater to strictly manufacturing in the capacity that we do it. And so and that makes it very difficult. And so it's unfortunate, and there's not a whole lot of help from that side of things, but you kind of you learn to make do and find other ways of moving forward.
Right. Well, if I find any, I'll let you know.
That'd be awesome. Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, I'll definitely consider that. Well, if anybody from the provincial or federal government listen to this one day, maybe they'll take a little note there, or just maybe help us out here and get some more awareness around some of these programs for Canadian manufacturers out there. And I think in general, a lot of governments out there, when they put these programs out there, it's kind of like they put them out there just to say that they're going to be out there, but only 1% of the manufacturing or the industry ever takes advantage of it because they have no idea how to tap into it. And that's always been a challenge. So,
Mhm.
Vlad, I want to thank you for coming out today. It's been great having you out. I really appreciate your time and your knowledge in the industry. Hoping that we'll be able to get you back one day and give us an update on what's going on and what new things are happening in the industry. Hope you've had a great Canada weekend and look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you so much, Harris, for having me on this show. It was a pleasure, and I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you soon.
See you.